here, and then like,
Oh,
yep.
so welcome everyone. Welcome to the Melanated Scholars, Queens and Kings Roundtable, where I and fellow scholars of color provide commentary on current events and topics salient to our identities. I am Dr. Rassheedah, the Inclusive Community Architect. I'm a speaker, diversity coach, and the founder and owner of Inclusive Action Institute, which provides personal and professional development solutions in diversity, racial justice, and leadership. Before I have my guests introduce themselves, disclaimer here, the thoughts and opinions expressed here are our very own. So let's just go around. Let's start with you, Dr. Frederick.
Sure. Dr. Fred Ingram. I am an assistant professor of instruction here at the University of Texas at Arlington. I have a split appointment between the Department of Criminology and Criminal Justice and the Center for African American Studies.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you.
Dr. Cori.
Hello, I'm Dr. Cori Bazemore James. I go by she, her pronouns. I'm a dual citizen of the United States and the Seneca Nation of Indians. And I am the Director of Retention and Success in the Graduate School Diversity Office at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities.
Welcome. Dr. Egypt.
I am Dr. Egypt Grandison. You can just call me Dr. Egypt. I'm an assistant professor of business at Bemidji State University, specialization in HR. I'm also an author by trade. I love what I do. I have over 10 years teaching experience, and I'm just here to have a good time.
All right. So, and that really is the core purpose of our time together, to amplify the voices of diverse identities. Why? Because it's simply not done enough. So this is the roundtable of queens and kings to get down with the get down. So let's get to it. We're going to hit a bunch of different topics, and we are on the clock for about an hour. We might go a little bit longer. We'll see how the conversation goes. But here it is. It's Black History Month. Do you think higher education is getting it right for people of color? And where does corporate America fit in terms of getting it right? What are your thoughts?
Who want to go first?
I mean, I'll go first. I mean, just solely based on my opinion, I think they have a lot of work to do. I think what I'm noticing is they'll go hard for Black history when certain events or certain situations take place. Case in example, the George Floyd incident. Black Lives Matter came in effect. Now, Black History Month is here, and people are going hard. Specifically, institutions are going hard for it. But on the other hand, I appreciate that, but they also need a lot of work. It needs to continue. It shouldn't happen just when certain situations happen, and it shouldn't end once February is gone.
Yep.
I agree with that. I think what's interesting is my current institution is the first institution that I've been at where I've seen like an actual month-long like celebration of Black history, like actually having events every single day, multiple events during a day, like an actual true celebration of Black history from the campus newspaper covering things, from campus media covering things, from the Office of Multicultural Affairs, the Center for African American Studies, everybody coming together to bring in guest speakers. Like I said, I gave a talk earlier today. So this is the first time I've actually seen an institution do it to this level. So that I think is cool. But I'm with Dr. Egypt, where there's performative measures and there's value add dollars for a lot of these corporations, because I think I saw recently one of these companies, I won't even shout them out, launched an HBCU t-shirt line or sweatshirt line or something like that. And I'm pretty sure that the funds that they're making from the sale of those shirts are not going to benefit my alma mater and alma maters of others. So I think it's interesting how, of course, always whiteness finds ways to commercialize blackness. As Dr. Egypt said, the death of George Floyd caused them all to begin to speak out about certain things when they were largely silent in the face of a lot of our trauma and experiences. So I sit on the defense of in between of loving when institutions actually allow us to celebrate ourselves loudly, but also watching for the performative.
Yeah. I don't think we're there. I don't know if we'll ever be there. You know what I mean? Like, these institutions weren't built for any of us. You know, they were built for the purpose. They were built by slave labor for the purpose of Christianizing and whitening Native people. So it wasn't for us. They're never going to fully get it. And it's institutions of higher ed. The purpose of higher ed is to assimilate people into a certain direction, you know, hopefully critical thinkers and whatnot, but still it's about assimilation into the norms of the institution, which is Eurocentric norms. So like, I don't know if we'll ever be there, but people can try and people are trying, and it comes and goes and how hard they try and how good they do at it. And it's still an afterthought for a lot of people, you know, like, oh yeah, I guess it's the end of February.
Right. But before we go on, I do definitely want to give a shout out to my Black Student Union at Bemidji State University, because they make it their business and priority to do something every day for the month of February. No matter COVID, I know COVID is happening and we're not able to do things in groups, but virtually they are doing it. So shout out to my Black Student Union at Bemidji State University and my co-advisors, Dr. David Friesen and Dr. Gabriel Warren.
All right. Shout out. And to that point, you know, shout out to all the Black student unions everywhere.
Yes.
My alma mater is San Francisco State University, which is
the Black Studies.
So come on, like, recognize. And I bring that up because students are such a powerhouse when it comes to driving diversity, inclusion, equity. Students hold so much power that they don't even realize. So kudos to students that are, you know, just doing the thing with all sorts of clubs and affinity groups.
Right.
So thank you for mentioning that. But now let me ask you all specifically, it's kind of a trick question, because I know you all know where I'm going with this, but specifically, why are Indigenous and Black people so easily dismissed when we think of all of these celebratory months, right? Is there room for solidarity? What's going on?
You trying to start trouble, Dr. Rassheedah. I see what you're doing. I see what you're doing here. I see what you're doing. And you know, I don't mind ruffling feathers. I like doing that. But to answer your question, I think, you know, people of color in general, we're dismissed because we still haven't had those conversations that need to be had. And when I say have them, I mean have them. That means we got to do the tears and the snot blowing and the raising of the voice. We got to get the points out. We have to do that in order to be able to move to the next level, to have that solidarity. You have to have the conversations. We have to be able to sit down and express ourselves freely. And we also have to be able to listen on the other hand as well, too.
Yeah,
I agree with Dr. Egypt. I actually want to go further back as to why, to answer your question. We've never really had a true reckoning or a true reconciliation of all of the trauma and the indifference, the trauma and the issues that our native folks and our Black folks have experienced here in this country. And part of recognizing and having a reconciliation means holding whiteness and white supremacy and the purveyors of each of those things accountable. And until we do that, we're always going to be dismissed because it benefits the status quo, right? It allows the existence of whiteness to continue to exist. It allows the mediocrity of whiteness to continue to police everything and to measure everything that we all do to whatever their idea is of greatness, right? Even if our desires, even if our credentials, even if our experience speaks to and or above everything that they have, they will still find a reason to make you second guess or question or feel inferior or begin to give you deficit thoughts about your own identity, the way you show up, the work that you do. And that's part of, like Dr. Egypt said, is the reckoning, and also with yourself. We have to begin to decolonize the way that we think.
Right.
You know, like Dr. Cori said, we got to get rid of the way we look at Eurocentric views and literally everything. And once you begin to decolonize your thoughts, like you don't rely on whiteness to measure and evaluate how important you are or how important the work is that you do. Someone asked me that earlier today, like, well, what about what they think? I said, this is the issue. Stop centering the voices of violent white people. The white people who have done the reading, the white people who are our co-conspirators, not allies, actual co-conspirators, have already done the reading. They're not offended because they know everything that we're saying is authentic and it's true. The people who are upset are the ones that don't want you to have advancement. So why should I care about what they think?
Right.
That's on point. And Dr. Cori, you and I actually met in a solidarity space that you created, specifically a space for Indigenous solidarity with Black. So tell me a little bit more about that so everyone can hear what was your reasoning behind that.
Yeah, so I founded a network within the student affairs profession called the Indigenous Student Affairs Network. The first ever professional network for people who do the work of supporting Indigenous college students. And it came about, my research came about around it because institutions so often just kind of pluck one of us and say, oh, you're Native, you know what to do. Tell you how to do it because we think we know better, even though we don't know anything about the culture. But we're going to tell you how to do it, but because you're Native, you'll know the things and you just figure it out. And so it's always like the white institutional presence that's there telling us how to do the work. And then we get pitted against other multicultural centers there's always this this battle, there's this constant battle that folks who work in Indigenous student affairs have of do we belong to the multicultural diversity, whatever centers or spaces? Are we our own thing because of our sovereignty as sovereign citizens? And by trying to decipher that for ourselves and try to fit in our space within the institution as sovereign people and try to not have to fight for resources, then it causes this riff. Why are you guys better than us? Trying to think you're better than us, trying to not be part of all this great multicultural work that we're doing. And we're you're great, but we can't be with you because then we'll have to fight for resources with you. So it's there's always these things that are happening, this white presence, the white gaze, it's something that's putting us in between, something in between us that's causing us to have to fight each other because we're fighting for the same resources, a little bit that we get. And that's just one little part of it. But, there's lots of history around Native and Black communities from long, long ago, and some really ugly history, some really beautiful history. And it kind of gets lost in between. And when we don't have conversations about what happened and where are we now and what stereotypes do our communities hold about each other, because we often don't have much exposure to one another in person. We see each other on TV, but we connect.
Yeah, and I actually think it's created that way on purpose, right?
Of course it is.
Rifts amongst communities, as they call it, the oppression Olympics, right?
Yes.
Worse, and then folks are actually pitted against each other.
Yes.
I mean, that's the whole essence of oppression. That one, the oppressive system has created things in such a way that they can stand back and folks, get at each other. Their work is done. But I do want to pivot now a little bit when we're talking about, again, the system of oppression, right? And when we think of bodies suffering under oppressive system. Let's talk about Elijah McClain. Elijah McClain, for folks who don't know, 23-year-old, killed while he was being arrested in Aurora, Colorado. And he was killed by a chokehold. So, and actually not just that, let me just read what I wrote here, or my question to you. So the police got him while he was walking down the street. They got him in a chokehold. They called EMS. EMS went ahead and administered a shot of ketamine. Okay. There's a lot of conversation around that. So my question to you is, given everything that we've seen, is a chokehold ever appropriate? What do you think? And what about the administering of ketamine? I mean, who's
so let's talk about this. I think Elijah just turned 25 yesterday, I want to say, or sometime this week, yesterday, the day before. He would have been 25 years old. For those who haven't seen the pictures of him, Elijah was probably 90 pounds, soaking wet, maybe. Not more than 5'7" or 5'8" feet tall, a very small young man. And not that his size mattered, but the point I'm making is that he was not a threat to anyone. And for them to have to administer drugs and then place him in a chokehold, this is the thing that really. I had this conversation with my students earlier this week, and it's one of the things that I'm trying to maintain, not step into my rage, right? But it's a situation where if we all understand that trauma is inextricably linked to DNA, and it is passed through DNA, and we fully understand that the lived experiences of people of color in this country are tied to traumatic experiences. And as Black people, our trauma in this country is tied to slavery. And policing came from slavery, right? And it broke from slavery and all of these things. There has not been a redoing and re-administering of how we view policing and all of these things. So all these things are directly linked. And because these things are directly linked, Black people will never have a positive relationship with police. It has nothing to do with us not liking authority. It has nothing to do with us not liking to follow the rules. It has nothing to do with us doing anything wrong and not being able to comply and all these other BS excuses that people come up with. It is that we know that chance encounter could literally be the last chance that we are alive. It could be the last opportunity that we breathe. It could be the last. It's literally a life or death situation for us. And the fact that people still don't understand that is infuriating. It is one of the things that sends me into the stratosphere, that we have to keep explaining to people that our humanity is at risk whenever we come in contact with police officers. I don't care to hear the arguments about what they think. The likelihood of Black people actually reaching for guns in these incidents are very rare, right? Even in the smallest of percentiles where Black people actually fired shots at officers during traffic stops, right? Those things don't happen. White people do it, right? They refuse to get out of cars. They fire shots at officers. They chase officers with knives. They physically fight officers, and they still manage to subdue these people and bring them into custody after feeding them. But we're not allowed to be afraid based on a genetic experience with the trauma of slavery and policing. I don't understand.
And what about this administering of ketamine? Is Dr. Cori or Dr. Egypt, what are your thoughts on that? Should that be okay without permission? Should that even be done? I mean, what?
No. First of all, they're not doctors. They're police officers. Okay, and it just doesn't sit well with me. Period. Because I think about the actions that happened that led up to that. It's almost like, had they not did this wouldn't have happened.
But for
exactly. So I'm not okay with that. First of all, you don't know what type of health or underlying conditions this young man had prior to that, and then you're injecting him with something. It's so many questions. No.
It makes me think of dealing with a wild animal and shooting him with
right.
Like they never saw him as a human being. They just saw him as a wild, uncontrollable animal, no matter how he was acting.
Right.
Yeah, when I was explaining to my son, and it's sad, for folks of color, especially Black people, we have to tell our children at a very small age, right? 3, 4, 5, maybe even younger than that. He's 9 years old now, but I had to explain to him how the situation equated to a person trying to shoot an animal, as you mentioned, when they put that animal to sleep. What's the word for it? When they
euthanize?
Yeah,
yes,
that. And it's just ridiculous. There's something so animalistic about what was done to this young man. And if you haven't seen the video, I encourage you to. I only saw a bit of it because it's traumatizing for me. It's re-traumatizing to what you said, Dr. Fred. But you see this young man minding his business, walking alone in the street. I think he had just come back from shopping. And the officer literally says, "You must stop because you look suspicious."
It's
the famous line.
It's one of the things. Yeah, it's one of the things that, like, for me, it's wild because white people have been the domestic terrorists in this country since the beginning of its existence, right? But they're so afraid of everybody. I don't understand how people who live their lives in fear have the power to decide whether or not you live or die. I think those two things just do not go together. And this situation happened just here in Texas, in Plano, during the week of the storm we had last week. An 18-year-old young man, I think he was coming from Walmart or coming from a store, minding his business, not bothering anybody. Mind you, we were in the middle. If you people don't know, like, it was bad. Like, even what the news and the media covered was bad. It was small in comparison to what we actually saw for a lot of people here in Texas last week. And this gentleman was minding his business, and the cops stopped this kid, stopped him and arrested him, and he spent the night in jail because he would not answer their questions. Right? We are in the middle of a pandemic and an unnatural disaster in Texas, and he was just simply trying to get home where he could be safe. And they literally followed him the entire way, and this young man had to spend the night in jail, which could have also exposed him to COVID-19 and all of these other things, simply because they could, and officers' discretion. And people will try to convince us that if he would have, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear it.
Right. I agree.
I don't want to hear it, because I'm like, I don't understand how a group of people who happen to be the scariest are the most violent, and everyone seems to just go about their business.
Yep. They have the law on their side. They win every single time.
Yes,
and they do.
How they want to.
Yeah.
And I also, though, have to make the distinction, being the diversity practitioner here, that obviously, as we know, not every person in every group is the same, right?
And correct.
Yeah. So we do have our strong allies, and we have our strong racial justice advocates. However, that does not negate what we see historically and present day situation. So I do want to be sure that we understand that fact. But now, when we start talking about history and present day, let's start talking about these name changes that we see have been taking place. And I often wonder, are these changes kind of a trigger happy and knee-jerk reaction to everything that's going on, or are these things really authentic? So the renaming of the Redskins to the Washington football team, to the renaming of Aunt Jemima, is it too little too late? Why or why not? And was this even okay to begin with? Speak to me, doctors.
No, it was never okay. They're making us into caricatures as human beings. It's the same thing. And we're either animals or we're fighting on a team because we're some sort of warrior, It's I'm trying not to cuss.
Hey! You if it got to come, it's got to come out. It has to come out.
Right.
It's too little, too late, in that we've been screaming for years that this is hurtful, this hurts kids, it hurts people, it hurts our representation as humans, it hurts our representation in policy and law because people don't see us as human, but still do it because it needs to be done. And don't pat yourself on the back. Say it's about damn time. Just do it fun, because obviously it's doable. They make it out to be like it's so impossible. They're going to lose everything and it's going to cost too much money. You make plenty of money. You're just fine. Just do it.
I think it's interesting how we can have our cultures appropriated and we're supposed to just laugh and smile about it, right? We're supposed to just go along with it and be fine with it. And I just think it's interesting that if we started doing things that were symbolic of white people, how fast they would come in and shut it down, or how fast they would come in and call something anti whatever, right? And then it's next level and it's shut down before it can even launch. And I think it's interesting how underdeveloped this country is when it comes to actually having checks and balances, although we claim to have them in the way that our government is set up, in the way that our...
I think we lost Dr. Fred.
Everybody else is... Can you see me now?
Okay.
Yeah. I think everybody's updating one by one. But, so I think that it's one of those things where, where we never have to... we never get the ability to have them see our sides of it. And the only way they will ever allow our stories to be told is if there's some benefit to them, which is interest convergence, right? Where it allows them to reap, benefit from, whatever change they allow for us to have. And then every space they take up, whiteness is property by Cheryl Harris, right? We talk about the way that white people just take up all the space and they don't make space for understanding of other people's experiences and cultures and how these things are deeply traumatic and that sort of thing. But we also play parts in it because we could stop watching the NFL like I did 5 years ago, right? We could stop supporting things that are representative of appropriation and are representative of traumatic times and are retriggering to, our brothers and sisters of color. We have a part in this. We buy into capitalism, which is how these things still exist. If people walked away from these things, they would have to change. But people don't want to do that. And so we are at sometimes our worst and most merciless enemies, honestly.
And I don't want to get into the subject of Thanksgiving too much. I know, Dr. Cori, you and I spoke about that, but you triggered that for me, Dr. Fred, when you spoke about how people can continue the system of oppression by buying into it. And I certainly see that every Thanksgiving. We know the atrocities that have occurred. And if you don't, I suggest if you're watching this, to go out and do the research and see how communities, indigenous communities, were slaughtered. And yet folks, Black and brown folks, right, are sitting right there at the table, cutting up some turkey and ham. And I get it. A lot of folks, have their reasons that they give, but it goes back to what you were saying, Dr. Fred. People still contribute to this very traumatic day. Dr. Fred, do you have anything you'd like to add to that, or Dr. Egypt?
I mean, I definitely agree. And that goes back to the conversations, the research, the getting the facts, the having a better understanding and moving on from there. But before we can get to that point, we have to have those discussions. We have to.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be easy and it's going to hurt. But we still have to have those discussions. We have to be heard.
Yeah. The original enslaved in this country were the natives. They were the original enslaved. And when they began to kill all of them off and there was no one to do the labor, they then decided, let's raid Africa. And that's how we got here. So it's our histories are connected for forever because of those things.
Absolutely.
So now let's talk about just the fact that so many of us are sick and tired, right? And sick of being tired. And this really is across the board. And I think everything that's occurred recently has really heightened certain truths for certain demographics that may not have been aware of what a racist world, what a racist system that we are actually living in as Black and Brown and Indigenous folks. So there has been talk by many people who are saying, I need to move out the country. Stevie Wonder is one of them. He recently gave an interview where he said he plans on moving to Ghana. He's mentioned this back in the 90s. He's mentioned it again. And he says he wants to move away because of America's racialized system. He just doesn't want his grandchildren to have to deal with the systemic oppression that we're talking about here today. So tell me a little bit about your thoughts on this. Is this a weird idea? Are there alternative options to moving outside of the country? And should other people of color consider moving out of the country? What do you think?
I think I may be going with Stevie. I mean, sometimes I do feel like that. But then the other thing is, I mean, you have to do what's going to be best for you and your family, or what works for you. But you also have to think about racism exists everywhere.
Yeah.
It may not be to the extreme or very open or the focal point in another country as it is in the US, because, we have this freedom of speech stuff that we do. So it still exists. So you get there and you isolate yourself and your family away from racism per se. And then one day they maybe some other family that's a non-color family moves into the area and they don't like Black people. You could have stayed in the US then. You're going to experience the same thing. I mean, I get it. We all want to be in a place where we can feel free and we're not dismissed and we're accepted. I don't know if moving out of the country per se is something I would do. I've thought about it though, but then it's everywhere. Racism is everywhere.
Go ahead, Dr. Cori.
I get it, because it's exhausting. It gets so.
Yes.
Yeah. But like for me, if I were to leave, I'm leaving my homelands.
Mm-hmm.
Find Native community outside of the US or the Americas. And so I'm here because this is my homelands. This is where my people are. I want to be around my people. I want to be around ceremony. There's nowhere for me to go for me.
And I think it's interesting too, because racism, like Dr. Idris said, is literally everywhere. There is not a place that whiteness has not touched. Okay. And so there's that, right? And then there's also, there's no one paying attention to like SARS when that was happening, like just a few months ago, like the story of like the police and how they are literally like killing, and they're Black cops, right? And they're literally killing young people for protesting, and they're killing them simply because they look a particular kind of way, which is anti-Blackness. So I'm like, again, and the police regime was set up by white folk, and now the Black people are working there because we all like to believe, and by we, some of us like to believe that if we hire more cops of color, more Native cops, more Black cops, more Latino cops, that's the answer to our problems. But SARS specifically showed us that is not the answer, because even though that level of power, that level of authority that exists because of the creation of the police state by whiteness, we are still affected by that. So I think a lot of people who aren't that aware of what's going on globally feel like escaping is it. And I think that we all have those moments where it's like, I just want to go somewhere, anywhere where I can just be Black and just be, or be a person of color and just be. Feeling. But that place is at the pearly gates, brother.
That's some truth right there. Because I was going to say as well, right? There is this sort of dream belief that we can hold when it comes to a different country, and folks kind of don't tend to realize that there are also issues of tribalism, right? There are literally, I mean, let's not forget what happened in Rwanda, okay? In the
absolutely
the same, you would think from the outside looking in, from an American lens, people, but now they're coming against each other because they're different tribes. And then you also have to think of countries that are anti-American. So it doesn't matter how Black you are, you're just not one of them. So it's been a dream of mine. I still might, go in Stevie's backpack or something.
I mean, I get it. But you also have to factor in finances as well, per se. And when I say finances, Stevie can up and go. Right. He can afford that to live a certain type of life.
Right.
Us working people, okay, it's maybe a little bit different. Mm-hmm. We may experience that said racism opposed to him because from just from looking at television shows and reading and then traveling to other countries too, it's different. It's people have different lifestyles. You see the difference in people that have money and people that don't have money.
Right.
Yeah,
the experience is going to be different. When you don't have no money, you're going to see a lot of things opposed to a person that has money.
Yeah. Stevie could go over there and build an entire compound.
I'm trying to tell you, and put on
for his entire family. Meanwhile, you have to uproot and go live in an apartment, right? No.
Yes.
So since we're talking about traveling, let's talk about tourism. CNN reports that tourism worldwide is suffering, and that's kind of an obvious one because folks just aren't traveling like they used to because of COVID-19. So should people be going on vacation to help the economy when we're thinking about?
Well, I'm just going to step in and say, I'm going on vacation. I'm not trying to help them out. I'm helping myself out because I need to keep my sanity. So I'm being safe when I'm going. But they're going to get these little coins I got so I can have a good time. I'm okay with that.
Where are you going, Dr. EJ?
I'll be going to Mexico in May for my birthday.
Yeah, a lot of it's I think for a lot of people though, Dr. Rassheedah, Dr. Egypt, it's big colonizer energy though, right? Like it is big colonizer energy because how did these native groups begin to start getting ill in the first place? You had people bringing their illnesses and their diseases into these places. So I think for me, like I'm like, look, like I have been staring at my own walls for the last year, like everyone else. I moved in the middle of a pandemic, right? I moved from DC to Texas in the middle of a pandemic, and you're talking about going from having community. My sister's there, I have cousins there, I have aunts and uncles there. My fraternity brothers are there, friends are there from undergrad, and all of that. So I had all of. So even though I was in my house, like by myself, I know that, if we all sit still for the next couple of weeks, we can do dinner, at like my cousin's house and stuff like that. So we go from that to like here where I literally don't know much of anyone. And
know that feeling.
And it's open like Atlanta and Houston and Dallas. It's open. People are out here pretending like the Rona left. And so for me, that definitely made me stay indoors. And so I get people being like, look, I want to be on vacation. I want to get away, but there's a part of me that's like, bro, like those people are working because they need to survive, right? Yeah. And like we're going over there. And if you look at the videos and the pictures, people are not going over like a couple of people on a vacation. They're going over there with like whole crews.
Oh, for sure. I definitely understand that part. I think some people move different. I'm moving a little bit different when I'm traveling. I'm not traveling as much as I would like or as much as I would have once COVID came in. But yes, and specifically it's our culture. Our culture is we doing it. We doing it big out here in these
Tulum
and things like that.
No one knew where Tulum was last year, and not everybody there.
Hello,
in a pandemic.
Yes, I get it, but if you look at those videos, they're still moving the same way. So I understand where the concern comes in at. Nobody's social distancing in the groups and stuff. People are still packing up. So I get that part. I definitely get that part. But if you realize it and you notice too, the hotels and these resorts they do take precautions though. Probably a little bit more than we do on this side of the world.
Dr. Cori, what are your thoughts on this? Should folks be traveling? Would you be traveling yourself?
I think no. I think no, because it's like, for me personally, I don't feel safe doing it because I have health conditions, and I'm scared for myself. I don't have to worry about passing it to someone else because I'm the one. But versus, I'm worried about people who, they're going for the reasons, not for the reasons of helping the economy. They're going for the reason of, I'm bored, I want to do something fun, and so I'm going to go down here where I don't care as much if people get it, if I'm passing it to people.
With the mask below their nose.
Yep. It feels very colonizerish that everyone's around countries.
Now, has this heightened for any of you the issues of classism?
Yes.
As concerns all of us, right? As concerns all of us. Very specifically, I want to say that, and I'll speak for myself. I come from a single parent household, blue collared background. So when COVID hit and things were shutting down and the government was talking about they're going to disperse money to people. Well, my mother was a housekeeper. So I knew folks most likely, if they were working like she was working back in the day, which is money cash, you're not a part of the system.
Right.
These, COVID relief dollars. But how does that make you all feel when you think of, whether or not you agree on vacationing, just the fact that you can do that, just the fact that you can work from home and you are a scholar of color? What does that bring up for you? Has it impacted any of you like it's done for me?
It's definitely making you think a lot. I don't think you could leave this, what we've dealt with, because it's trauma. We're all literally going through trauma right now. We don't know what the effects of it are going to look like until years from now. And I think we all can agree on that. But it's definitely made me look at people differently. And y'all probably are doing the same thing in the way that people have operated during this thing, and to see the way that the government is operating. The fact that we are arguing about a $15 minimum wage, and this is being argued by wealthy white men,
people
primarily,
that don't know struggle.
You know what I mean? Who children are millionaires themselves, so they don't have to worry about their children not being able to do certain things. And I don't understand why we hate poor people so much, but the condition of poorness and poverty was created structurally by the majority class. And that is why they're fighting so hard to keep us from passing equitable laws and legislation that would literally lift people up out of their circumstances. So if nothing, I've always paid attention, but I'm really paying attention now, paying attention to the people, our people who are arguing against it for one reason or another, why they don't agree with it and why they don't think it's fair. How could you? Most of us are a paycheck away from poverty ourselves, even as scholars of color and doctors, right?
Yeah.
Most of us, like you just said, are not of wealth and means. Yeah. So that could very easily be any of us. To not have the concern of those, the least of us, is wow. Wow.
It's humbling. It should humble the other people as well too, but it's very humbling.
Yeah.
I have to watch it. I have to check myself not to complain too much.
I agree. I'm the same way.
Yeah.
I'm bored. I wish I could go out and do whatever. I shut the hell up because my job is secure, and I know it is.
Mm-hmm.
My husband's job is secure. Thankfully, we're fine, and we can afford to have groceries brought to us. We can afford the things we need, and we will be fine.
Yeah.
And so I just need to shut up because I don't I want to, joke around and complain on social media stuff, but I'm so many of my friends have it.
But the funny thing is, I'm almost sure out of all four of us have been there before.
Yes.
We've been there. And I will say 2 years ago, I was that person.
Look, 7 months ago, I was that person.
Yeah. So
in the middle of the pandemic. Yes.
That's why I said it's humbling. It's humbling.
Yeah, it's something that I know for me when I go grocery shopping, or I, just I'm out. I have to go somewhere, right? Put gas in the car or something. I
Right.
put myself in that person's shoes because I think to myself, most likely this person, and there's 99% chance that this person is only here because they have to. They need that coin to pay the bills,
Yes.
rent, to pay their child, because I know if I had the option to not work at the grocery store, to be a bagger, a checker, whatever, work at the deli, whatever. I mean, it's COVID. I wouldn't go to work if they said you could stay home. So for me, like it touches me, and I can't ignore kind of that positioning of class. For us that have come from that blue collar background, just seeing that shift, it's unsettling, but it's a reality for us.
Yeah.
So since we're talking about coins and getting that coin, I want to go to Cardi B. So Cardi B recently shared, I believe she put a Instagram up, but anyway, she shared that she gets paid less than white people for endorsements, and you can find the article on online. And she says it's insulting that she gets paid less than her white colleagues in the music and fashion industry. So my question to you is, do you believe melanated scholars also get paid less? What say you?
What say you is, Cardi B, I love you, but welcome to reality, because that's what's happening in the real world. Unfortunately, people of color, if you're not white, you're black, basically. You get, and that's just
That's
the
how
way
they
I
see
see
it.
it.
Yeah, that's how they see it.
You're gonna get paid less, and it sucks, but I hate to say it is what it is, but it is what it is.
Yeah, it's not even a matter of if I believe it or not. The evidence is evident.
Right.
Out there. Women's equal pay day is not white women's equal pay day.
Right.
The scale.
Right.
I think it's interesting. We're definitely underpaid, right? I know I'm underpaid, right? But I think it's interesting too, because you got to go even larger today. It's funny, these topics that we're talking about are things that I've engaged with at some point this week. So it's funny. Taraji P. Henson made $40,000 in Benjamin Button.
What?
It was $40,000 in Benjamin Button, and that film wasn't she? She was an Academy Award nominee for Best Supporting Actress.
Like one of the
yes. She got paid $40,000 for that film, prior to Tyler Perry paying her $500,000 to appear in one of his films, the highest she had ever made for a film as $100,000. And now we all know that these leading white actresses, and of course these leading white men, and even black men, are making millions of dollars. And before Tyler Perry, she had never made $500,000 in a movie. And those Tyler Perry films that she was in were within like the last 10 to 12 years. Sit with that one.
That goes back to those conversations. You don't want to talk about that. The people that are making the money don't want to talk about the money that they're making because of the color of their skin. Yeah. But that plays a part in that as well. Now, I'm not taking away from white people's their skill set and what they're good at. But at the end of the day, they make more than black people or people of color, and we do it either better or just as good as them.
And they make the money because they're the deciding factors, right? They don't make the money because they're better, more intelligent, more effective. That's not why. Like, if that was why, like I've always said, I don't have a problem with like losing out on the job interview or losing out on something if the person who beat me is just that much better than I. They showed up better that day. They were more prepared than I was. Their skill set, their background, all of those things were better than mine. I will take, I'll take that L. But if we all know hand over fist that I was the better candidate or the better person for this, and your reason for not taking me is because of the color of my skin, I'm always going to have an issue with that. So the mediocrity of whiteness is not something that they're measuring or what they're paid for, right? They're paid for being white, right? We are paid based on the color of our skin, and those are the facts. Sorry, Cardi.
But we love you, Cardi B.
Yeah. And I was going to say the thing about this is what's very important is also to look at the data, right? Look at the research, and the research speaks for itself when it talks about how folks of color are paid in comparison to their white counterparts. And then we also have to look at the intersectional identities of being both a woman and a woman of color, and how that starts to stratify it even further. And then for being a Black or Indigenous woman, right? That goes even further.
Yes.
When you think the scale is low for people of color to begin with, if you're a woman of color, a Black woman, an Indigenous woman, the scale is even.
You're at the bottom of the totem pole, basically.
It's lower than you would even imagine. So, you know, it's important for folks to consider that, because what do you all believe? What do you all say when you meet perhaps folks in a younger generation than you, or just folks who, you know, may not have achieved the same academic credentials that you have, but they say, hey, doctor, you made it. You made it. How does that make you feel when
you see the look on my face?
I'm like,
Cori, how does that make you feel when you hear that?
The look alone. First of all, I'm humbled, and I appreciate all the kudos and the hoo-has and stuff, because, and my parents are probably watching this too. They brag all the time, and I appreciate that. I appreciate the support from my sisters, my brothers, all of that. But at the end of the day, we still have to work just like anybody else, if not harder. It doesn't come easy. People think because you have the title in front, you just go push the door open and you get the, you know, the position you want, or you get the amount of money you want. We have to sell ourselves. I think I work harder selling myself now than I did before I got the title in front of my name. Because
and I don't think people understand that. People don't get that. They're like, "Oh, you're a doctor. You're a doctor. You're a doctor. So you're rich." I'm like, "But I'm not." But you know what I mean? And not just that. Like the hustle. Like you are now your own brand. You are literally your own brand. So aside from, you know, your salary, your base pay, like any additional thing you get, speaking engagements, keynotes, you know, guest lectures,
but you
appearances.
Have to go out there
you have to go out, and they don't know that you got to build your own website. You got to maintain your own website. You got to either build it yourself or have it paid for. You got to be able to do all of these things. They don't know that as a scholar, right? As a professor, or even as a staff member at an institution, that we can't get paid for certain things, right? And that we have to get permission to be able to do certain things. You know what I mean? And although, like, you know, you would think that it's my voice, it's my words, it's my words on a page, and that should be sufficient enough. If there is not a benefit to the institution for what you are getting, they are not going to allow you to do it. There are certain things that you can do, and they can't really do anything. So bringing in grants and bringing in funding that way, if you get a book deal, these sorts of things, it's fine. But if someone says, I want Dr. Egypt to come and talk to NYU, we're going to fly her in and we're going to pay her $10K for this appearance, that got to go through legal. Even though it's Dr. Egypt who they are requesting, or Dr. Cori. And these are things that people don't know.
It's because you attach to that institution.
Yes. People don't get that.
And Dr. Cori, how do you feel when folks tell you you've made it?
You made it, girl.
I always struggle with, like, how much do I want to, like, because obviously I want to help the next generation. Like, you come on. This is not, like, don't put it all on me. This is us. Like, come on, follow me. And at the same time, I know the higher up you go, the more alone you are, and the more you have to play the game, and the more the man, or you're gone. As closer you get to the man, the more they say, what happened to you? You know, like, be with us. And it's like, I am.
It's a struggle.
Yeah, it's hard.
Y'all, I came from DC, and living in DC for the past decade, right? You don't realize what an experience that is until you leave it. And I want to say, and I want to explain further. Okay. There are so many people in my inner circle. That we're like, less than 1% of the population, people are doctors, But like, so many of the people within my inner circle were pharmacists, PhDs, JDs, engineers, all of these things, and we're still regular. I got my hoodie on, I got my power, you know what I mean? Like, we're still those people, but that was normal to us. It was nothing to be in a room of 20 people chilling, listening to whatever we listen to, having a good time, having a game night, and everybody enters a doctor, right? That was regular for us. And so when I came to Texas, in my cohort, for people who don't know this, when we get hired and you come into an institution, we come in and it's at certain times of the year, specifically in the fall. And we came in, there was 126 of us in my cohort that came in to my institution this year. Of the 126, 64 of us were male. And from what I understand, of the 64, 2 of us were Black men.
Wow.
2 of 126 of 64, 2, and we both actually came from DC, which is funny. And so in my mind, I'm like, okay, I'm going to a place. There's so many schools in Dallas. Y'all know there's tons of schools here. I've not seen so many schools in a place like this outside of Boston, right? Where there's so many schools like bodegas, right? Like there's so many.
Like bodegas.
Yeah. And so I'm thinking, I'm like, okay, I'm going to get here and I'm going to meet other young Black scholars who just moved here and make connections and form a bond and get to know people. And I'm like, yeah, so like, where are all the other new Black doctors who just came to Dallas, Fort Worth area from other places who are new coming in this year? And everybody's looking around like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, so you mean to tell me that I'm the only, or one of the only in this space, under 40, single without kids? That is crazy for me to fathom after leaving a place where that was like, you know what I mean? That was the norm. And so like, there's so many elements to this. Yep. You know what I mean? That people don't understand.
We tend to be the only. So let me ask you this, and this will be probably close to our final question, and take about maybe a minute or two each to answer it, maybe a little longer. But since we're on the topic of being scholars, and specifically, this is a roundtable of doctors. Okay, first of all, give it up, woo! As Dr. Fred mentioned. We and others like us of color represent less than 1%. It's less than 1%, right? Yeah. Of folks in total who get a doctorate. So if this is the pie, okay, as scholars, as melanated scholars of color and doctors, we represent less than 1%. So chew on that for a minute for those of you who are watching and listening. Less than 1%. So, having said that, how do you feel when anyone has approached you? And let's say even specifically in the academy, but I'll broaden it. When anyone has approached you and says, why do you have to call yourself doctor? And I know that
every topic you bring it up. I was on Twitter this week, I swear, y'all.
Dr. Frederick, you thought that sweat started popping off your head.
Listen.
Let me ask this question, just by a show of hands. Have any of you been questioned about your title as far as not calling yourself doctor?
I'm going to do a half a hand. Like, I'm going to do just like a half a hand there.
So tell me, Dr. Fred, how do you feel? How do you respond to something like that, if you can, in a minute or less?
Right. So I think a lot of people make the assumption that the only doctors are medical doctors or MDs, right? Which is obtuse, right? To even think such a thing, because no one just was born an MD, right? You had to go to school, you had to be trained. The original doctor was a PhD. We are the people who give space and create opportunities for people to go on to become MDs. And so the fact that we even have to argue that is insane to me. But I think even more so because I have a doctorate of education similar to you, I think that people want to minimize our experience or want to minimize the degree, not realizing that we went through the very same things that everyone else who had to complete a doctoral degree did. And so most of it is, watching, like when Dr. Biden, became first lady, people were like, she shouldn't call herself doctor and all these other things because she doesn't have a medical degree. And I'm like, well, when you earn your degree, you can call yourself whatever you like. But I'm Dr. Engram.
Yes. And what about the rest of you? How do you feel about that statement, about even being approached in that way, whether or not you have? How do you feel about that? Someone telling you, yeah, why do you even call yourself that? You really shouldn't.
I think, and I did a half of a hand. Number one, see, I don't have a PhD, and this is where people get this confused. I have a DBA. It's a doctorate of business administration. It's totally different from a PhD. We work off theory. We work for the business side of it. So that's in a category of its own. As far as medical doctors, even with PhD, we still have to do residencies. We still have to do the long drawn out dissertations, or the whatever you want to call them, the doctoral studies, or whatever you want to do. We still have to do all of that stuff. We probably stay in school just as long as a medical doctor. And that's for a PhD, EDD, or a DBA. So as Dr. Engram said, when you get your degree, I will be more than happy to put the title on it. But until then, this is Dr. Egypt.
Period.
And put some respect on it when you say it.
Respect.
See, I'm still working myself up to having that for myself. Like, I still have a hard time calling myself doctor.
I had the same experience. People were calling me doctor before, while I was in school. They were like, Dr. G. I was like, don't do that. Right. They were like, Dr. G before the fact. But it wasn't them. It was me, because I had to work on that. I think that's an inner thing, because guess what? When you accept that you're Dr. Cori BJ, it's real. It's real. You did it. Yeah. Nobody else did it. You did it.
Dr. Cori, what's your reservation with it?
I think for me, it's partially cultural in that I don't want to separate myself from people.
Yeah. I felt that too.
So like when I think if I'm from, or especially around Native folks, I feel very uncomfortable calling myself doctor. So I mean, I want to get to that place, and I know, like, usually a lot of people assume I'm not, even though it's in my email signature. Like, they don't think that. Sometimes they still think I'm a student. They treat me like I'm a student. I'm like, no, I'm not a student club president. I am a doctor. Like, what the hell? So yeah, I think for me, it's the distancing thing, and like,
I can see that. I can see that. It's almost like you're by yourself.
Yeah.
Once the title goes on, you're by yourself.
Because it's an expectation that comes with it, right? Like, people expect you to know all the things instead of understanding journalistics. But I'm an expert of some things, not all the things, right?
So we'll have to continue this conversation, because I'm very interested in digging.
I think Dr. Rassheedah is frozen. She's coming back.
Am I frozen?
I think
no. Am I frozen?
No, you're good now.
Okay, but I was going to say we're going to have to come back to this conversation, because I'm really interested in digging in deeper, particularly when we think about other folks in the academy pushing against calling you as scholars of color, a doctor, because I've had that happen to me as well. And I think it's absolutely fascinating. There is an article out there written by another scholar, Latinx, female identifying scholar. I think the article is called Call Me Dr. Garcia. So I would suggest folks go ahead and take a look at that, because at least when it comes to having those conversations with colleagues in the academy, in higher education institutions, and people are questioning you, as scholars of color specifically, we stand on the shoulders of so many that came before us. And again, looking at the numbers themselves, there aren't really that many. Right. So it speaks truth to power when you can own, and you do own, what you've worked so hard for. And it also serves as an encouragement for the next generation. So yes. I want to thank all of my doctors at the round table, Dr. Fred, Dr. Egypt, Dr. Cori, for joining me here today at this Melanated Scholars Queens and King. The plan is to have something go live every Friday at 7 p.m. CST. At least when it comes to this Scholars Roundtable, you can see us at least once a month. We might be on twice a month. We'll see what the reaction is. So drop a comment, let us know, reach out. And then as a final for you all watching us here, if you'd like to get on the email list, go ahead and stop by www.inclusiveactioninstitute.com, or you can go ahead and just press the subscribe button and you'll be notified when the next one is on. But do keep an eye out for us on Fridays, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. And we thank you, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.